Okay, we're going to begin the Committee of the Whole of the City Council of Urbana, the time being 20 after 7. So I call this meeting to order, and I ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Ms. Barnes?
Here.
Mr. Bowersox? Mr. Garrick?
Here.
Mr. Lewis?
Here.
Mr. Roberts?
Here.
Mr. Smythe? Here. Ms. Stevenson?
Present.
Mayor Pressing?
Okay, thank you. And we'll note that Councilman Bowersox is away on a personal leave, vacation. So, will there be any additions or changes to the agenda? And I believe that we've been actually notified that there will be a change in the agenda. And we've received a memo from city staff requesting that item number 12, which is a resolution 2009-03-011R concerning a zoning map change at 2218 East University Avenue, the KC Retail Company, will be postponed until the May 11th committee meeting. So we received that notice with our packets. I believe everybody's been informed of that. I have been told that there's a person here in the audience who wishes to nonetheless come forward and speak. So when we get to that section of public input, you can still come forward, but we're not going to be actually discussing that tonight. Will there be any other changes or additions to the agenda? Okay. Will there be a staff report at this time? Okay. Yes. Okay, we have a couple staff reports. Okay.
I have a couple of items to let you know about. The first is some good news. We received notification from HUD on March 2nd of a grant renewal for the Supportive Housing Homeless Families in Transition Program. We received $196,879. And we are just waiting on the grant agreement and the letter finalizing our award from HUD. That's good news. And the second piece is the Consolidated Social Service Funding. It's that time again. And before you, there's a packet of information. It's copies of all the applications. We received 43 applications this year. And also included is a previous funding matrix and the eligibility matrix copy in with the applications, and schedule of presentations for the special meeting, which will be next Monday night from 5:30 to 7. And it lists the agencies that will giving presentations. They either have requested a substantial increase of money from last year, or it's a new agency or a new program. At this time, we're not sure what the total amount will be. We're still waiting on budgets. And so hopefully in the next few weeks, we'll have a total amount that will be available for the
allocation? Okay. Okay. We have a question, Kelly, for...
When will we actually vote on this?
Probably not until June when the budget.
Okay. And council members, and I guess Lynn won't be here, Danielle did this forever, our end. So David, are you up for the challenge?
Well, it turns out that that's one of those things that stuck to chair number 2. So
Okay.
yeah,
All right.
Excellent. Appreciate that.
Although the sheer gratitude I'm hearing makes me want to reconsider.
All right. And then Mayor Pressing?
I think Lynn would like to dedicate her giant packet of materials.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I made one for her, too.
That's right. Well, a little bit of homework will never hurt as you approach the council.
So I
That-
will
Okay, what
I'll be
else, Tom?
sending an email out with the matrices electronically as well. And I'm assuming because of the time, we'll probably do box dinners again, so I'll send information about what everybody would like.
Okay, so next Monday, 6, did you say, or 5:30?
5:30.
5:30, okay, get that
Yes,
straight.
and the first presentation will start about 5:40.
Okay,
And I'll apologize right now, I won't be here. I'll be in the Green Cities Conference.
okay.
I will be here, but I'll be eating Charlie's lunch too.
Well, UPTV will be recording that, so you can, if you're not here, you'll be able to see it later, the presentation.
It's going to be recording him eating 2 lunches? Lunch and dinner. Okay. Well, that is important work, and we appreciate you preparing us for it. Okay, does that cover then the reports by staff? Others? All right, then let's move to the approval of the minutes of our previous meeting. Okay, we've got that. Motion and a second. Are there any changes or corrections to the previous minutes? Seeing none. Those in favor of approving?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Okay, they're approved. All right, this will be the time for public input. We've got a couple of people who've requested it, and I guess I'm going to start here with Steve O'Brien. Please come forward, and you have 5 minutes to submit your thoughts to the City Council.
Thank you. My name's Steve O'Byrne. My address is 501 West Church in Champaign. I'm an attorney. I'm here on behalf of my client, Jean Thompson. Ms. Thompson owns the property at 203 Smith Road. She's an adjacent landowner to the property that is the subject of, I guess it's agenda item 12, the proposed rezoning and zoning map change for the property that Casey's is involved in. A minute ago, in commenting to something else, you said it's always good to keep the City Council informed and give them a heads up, and that's what we're trying to take the opportunity of doing again tonight. As you can see from your packet, this is a matter that is going to be, or at least is proposed to be, postponed tonight, and that there's going to be some follow-up between city staff and the representatives of Casey. We've talked to the city tonight, and they're going to make an effort, I think, now to include us in that meeting. But when that meeting is over, there's going to be information that's going to come back to you as you sift through it and consider whether or not to pass a resolution in opposition to what is being discussed, and just really see what's going on. And I guess what I wanted to do is maybe provide just a little bit of background and reinforcement to that process when you look at things. This is my client has lived in this property since 1976. The proposed use that Casey's has, if you look at the submittal in the documents, they're talking about putting in one of their new, I don't think maybe the right word is jumbo, but it's one of their new larger modeled stores, significantly larger than the store they currently have just down the road from this current location. And I think bottom line, when you look at it, and we're already dealing with a residential area and an adjacent residential usage, is that what they're trying to do is just too much and too ambitious and too big for the parcel they're looking at. Part of this building or the improvements could be as close as 3 feet to my client's home. This council has dealt with and looked into issues of noise and lighting and screening as you looked at both the Aldi's project and what you're now experiencing with the Meyer project. And on in a smaller scale, these exact same concerns exist with this property. And everyone, I guess, needs to go into it with an open mind, but I would submit to you, I don't think that there is adequate screening, adequate setbacks, adequate noise limitation and light limitation that can be done for this particular property, given the size of the particular project that the is trying to be established there. And so bottom line, it's not compatible. My client is obviously concerned. That concern led her to consult with Tom Brown to address her concerns of whether this would have and to what extent it might have a negative impact on the value of her property. One of the things I'd like to leave with the council tonight and to just make a part of your record is the letter that Mr. Brown has given to her. It is not a formal appraisal, but it is his opinion, having viewed the property in person. And when you look at it, you will see, at least it's his opinion, that it's really not possible, given the size of what they're wanting to do and the location and proximity of Mrs. Thompson's residential property and other property in the area, to adequately separate them, that it will have a negative impact on the value of her property. It's been opined, at least by one realtor, it could be as much as 20% of the value. And this is apart from just the whole quality of life of living and continuing to live in a home that she's been in for 30-some years. This property right now, at least as it's proposed to be used, is not only going to have sale of gas and sale of many of the products that Casey's does on a kind of convenient basis. It's kind of also expanding into some of the fast food realm, where they're going to have pizzas, submarine sandwiches, other hot food, where again you're going to have a whole nother layer of activity of cooking foods, cooking smells, activity of people coming in and out now for hot food as a main reason of potentially going there, as opposed to simply going there for gas. Their proposal is to operate this particular location from, I think, 6 in the morning until 11 at night. The area right now, there are a whole bunch of trees on this lot. For this particular project to go forward, those trees are going to have to come down. I don't know if you've gotten an input from your arborist. He has been out to the property, and I would urge or suggest to the council again as you deliberate that that's something that would be wise for everyone to follow up on. One of the other items I'd like to leave with you is just even a cursory search of the internet shows that convenience stores, whether they be Casey's or not, but in this case Casey's in particular, they become a target for crime or other questionable behavior. It appears that there's some kind of a crime almost daily at some Casey's throughout both the state and the country. And again, it's a matter of, is this an intrusion into this area that's unwarranted and unnecessary at this time?
Do you want to summarize then?
So I would just simply urge you to have all of this before you at the time this next comes before you. I had one other point of clarification to what you had said earlier. Ms. Thompson and I are here tonight, but if it's correct, there will not be any discussion after what we're doing right now. I'd like to know that, and we'll take our leave of you if that's the case. If there would be some discussion later on, then of course we'll stay and be available.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Charlie.
Mr. Burnett, have any of the other neighbors approached you or talking to you, hired you as their attorney or anything like that going on?
They've not hired me. Other neighbors have been present both at the initial county meeting, the owners of Mercer Apartments that I think sits to the, I got to get my directions right, to the west. Orrin Hutchcraft's father lives in the area. He appeared before the county. I think some people appeared the last time it was before this body, March 9th or something like that. But in terms of, has anyone else hired me? No, they have not.
All right. Thank you for your input. The staff, because there's going to be further meetings of the participants in this discussion, have asked that the actual discussion and this agenda be removed from, this item be removed from our agenda tonight, and it will appear again on the City Council committee meeting May 11th. And this was and the request was that this would allow staff time to negotiate conditions for a draft annexation agreement and to ensure that the site plans improvements would be met, and basically to iron out any questions that they had concerning the development. And now that I've learned that you're going to also participate in that discussion, I think that's appropriate.
Thank you. If I could I leave these two documents with the clerk to make a part of the file?
Okay. Is there anybody else who would like to speak at this time as part of the public input? Scott Dossett, do you feel like you've given your contribution?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, all right. All right, so we're going to move on to the items on the agenda at this time and close public input. Our first discussion item is agenda item number 5, ordinance number 2009-04-034, an ordinance amending Schedule J of Section 23-183 of the Urbana Local Traffic Code, prohibiting parking at all times on certain streets. And we have Public Works representative to speak to this or not? Oh, yeah, but thank you, Mr. Gray.
Thank you. Before you is a memo reflecting discussion at a recent Urbana Traffic Commission meeting, and the request is to prohibit parking in a select area on the east side of Gregory Street, south of University Avenue, north of Clark Street. It's between a private driveway and an alleyway. There's an attached ordinance stipulating the specific area for no parking, and it's basically for safety reasons, visibility reasons for in and out of the alley and the private driveway. And it's also an area where people have been circumventing, not paying the metered area, which is just accommodate turnover at the Dairy Queen restaurant.
Okay. Are there questions? Yes, Charlie.
I move to send this to council the recommendation for approval.
Second.
Okay, we've had a motion and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's moved forward to City Council. We have one more item that has to do with traffic and streets, ordinance number 2009-04-035, an ordinance approving the intergovernmental agreement with the City of Champaign, the Board of Trustees of the University of Illinois, and the Champaign County Regional Planning Commission for the review of signal clearance intervals. These are at targeted intersections in the Champaign-Urbana area. Mr. Gray.
Thank you. The CUAT staff had applied for a Highway Safety Improvement Program grant, which would look at select intersections to improve safety, particularly whether help prevent right-angle T-bone type crashes. And the study is to look at an all-red clearance interval at these selected intersections as to establishing an all-red phase and for what length of time it would be. So it's fairly labor-intensive, and this is a grant, 10% local match, 90% HSIP grant money. And we basically split our share based on the number of intersections that will be looked at in Urbana. And our share, as the memo says, is $1,800, and we'll take that out of an existing line item account in our Public Works budget.
Okay. Charlie.
I move to send this to council with a recommendation for approval.
Second.
Okay.
I'm practicing for when Lynn's not here.
Okay, very good. Yeah, it's very efficient. Charlie and David Garrett. Those in favor of doing so? Oh, we have a comment from Mr. Gray.
I'm sorry.
Oh, Gray?
Yeah, I needed to add one thing. In the ordinance that recommends approval of the agreement, there's in page 1, section 2, we need to omit the fourth line down where it says assignment and estoppel certificate. Those 4 words should be struck and the word agreement should be inserted. So that last sentence well, would read execution of said agreement as so authorized.
Okay, did
And the motion with that a change.
the people who have made the motion second and agree to that correction? Okay. All right, so the amended ordinance, as indicated, is up for vote. Those in favor for moving this forward to council, please indicate by saying aye. Opposed? All right, thank you. Thank you, Bill. All right, ordinance number 2009-04-036, an ordinance reauthorizing establishing a civilian police review board. Mr. Rent.
Good evening. I'm coming before you. I brought the ordinance establishing a civilian police review board for your review and reauthorization. As you know, the ordinance calls for quite a process of review prior to us actually getting to this stage. And so several weeks ago, we actually issued an invitation to several community groups and organizations and individuals who had served on the original task force to make public comment. I believe that the public comment responses should be in your packet, as well as, and I apologize, there are a few memos in there. There was an original memo, a second memo that discussed the information that Mr. Dossett shared with you, which is the public input session that was held with the Civilian Police Review Board on last Wednesday. And then finally, there is the revised memorandum, and again, I apologize for that, that actually tries to incorporate some of those recommendations that were brought after discussion with the mayor and staff. I believe we've decided to take the somewhat conservative posture of saying, you know, the true mechanism of this board, which is the appeals process, has not really been tried and tested yet. And so while there are some cleanup things and housekeeping things that we feel may and are appropriate, as you can see in the draft that we provided to you, we didn't make any drastic changes at this time. So you see that there's been a change incorporating the suggestion by, I think it's the Champaign-Urbana Citizens for Peace and Justice, had recommended that there be some time requirements and reporting requirements for the police department and responding to internal investigations and responding specifically to the complainant. We've incorporated that. We have modified it somewhat to make the timelines what we feel is a little bit more realistic in consideration of the resources that are available, the personnel resources that are available to the police department. And of course, we have also requested in that, we've also rewritten the section that sends out the reauthorization process to, I think, April of 2011. So I'm just here to take any questions that you may have regarding the process of the ordinance or the functioning thus far.
Okay, I'm sure we have some. Mayor Prossing.
Yeah, in regard to the shortening the time or defining the time that the police department has to respond to a complaint, I did check with Chief Bealey, and their internal requirement was 60 days, and the request was for 30 days, I believe. So we came up with 45 business days. And that raises another issue here. If you're looking on page 4, item G, it says complaints shall be filed within 45 calendar days. And I think just, you know, to make it symmetric, why don't we say 45 business days? That would be my other suggestion on changing it.
All right. Are there other comments or questions concerning the ordinance?
For Todd or in the general discussion?
Well, Todd's up here. He can answer also. I guess we're going to open this up to general discussion at this time. Charlie first, and then Lynn.
Yeah, Todd. One of the issues that was raised by Reverend Banks a little while ago struck a note, but the flip side of that is, do we have any requirements for composition of boards other than for the design review boards, which call for people from specific neighborhoods, for any of our boards or commissions?
You know, I would not know the answer to that. I apologize. The mayor is raising her hand.
The mayor may, so maybe the mayor can comment.
I'm pretty sure that we have requirements for Public Arts Commission. And I'd have to, see where the requirements are here, but I've always understood that the mission is to try to get a diverse group, and that's what we've tried on every appointment, whether or not it's spelled out in the ordinance, and we can certainly spell it out in the ordinance.
If it's okay, I would like to actually clarify also. I believe that in section 1922D, there is language in the original ordinance and current ordinance that basically says that in making her appointments, the mayor should strive to appoint people who are reflective of the community, and it includes several, so.
1922,
D.
Page 2,
And
D.
Section 19222D.
What? Can I be recognized?
Okay, yeah. Heather Stevenson, you want to talk?
well, wasn't it, didn't you try to find someone that kind of in this area would represent each ward, kind of?
Well, we sort of had to make some trade-offs. We tried to make ethnic, and geographic balance, and it wasn't perfect. But I think we do have a very diverse board, so I was kind of surprised that issue was raised.
Sure.
But it is, and again, it is spelled out in the ordinance, which I haven't read the ordinance for a while, but I think the appointments do reflect that, all these categories, including different neighborhoods. I couldn't do it perfectly that every ward had somebody.
Sure.
Okay, and Lynn?
I'm supportive of moving this forward with only the minor tweak that Todd's described with regard to changing the days. That makes sense. I am not, I'm sorry, and as well as the change that the mayor mentioned. Thank you very much. And would not be supportive of making more, what I would say, substantive changes in the area of the composition of the board in terms of allowing someone who's been convicted of a felony, or the other issue that was noted with regard to an independent investigator. Those were things that, boy, we really talked about a lot when we first developed this ordinance, and talked about those things with council at that time, and we also reviewed other documents from other cities, and I think we, at least the vote came out that we were supportive of the draft as presented at council. And I think given that the board hasn't dealt with an appeal, it's a little premature to make drastic changes regardless. So I hope that we'll move this forward with the tweaks as already discussed. And I'd like to make a motion to do so.
Second.
Okay, a motion has been made and seconded. There's still open discussion. Is there other comments? Yes, Mr. Lewis.
Well, I would like to discuss the issue of distribution, and I think it's important to understand where we are with our documentation. And I think I talked to Mr. earlier today, and he said we're in the process of trying to develop a language that will be kind of, I don't want to use the word generic, but language that most people understand about what this is all about and get the distribution out there. I think it's very important to have the information published at the churches, the barbershops, those places that wouldn't normally be, places that you would consider, because the general public needs to understand what it's about, and I think we need to do our homework in terms of how we market the Police Review Board. And I think we're almost there. Is that right, Mr.?
Yes, sir. We've just done our first printing of the brochures, and admittedly, we only printed, I think, about 100. And part of that is just because I'm certain that there will be errors that are pointed out, and I'd rather go back and print 1,000 later than have to, trash that 1,000. So, but also in the next meeting that we have for the Civilian Police Review Board, which is scheduled, I believe, for April 29th, they'll also be reviewing our Know Your Rights insert, which will also, the same content will be used on a poster. And I just very quickly like to sort of say the issues of community outreach and making sure that the community is aware of this service that the city offers, or this process, is extremely important. I think it's extremely important to the board. They've voiced that. Certainly also, originally it was very important to make sure that we had the rules and the administrative process and procedures in place to deal with an appeal should we get it. And so, you know, we are working and marching our way towards that. I think we are in the position now to where, as Mr. Lewis said, we are ready to do a much more extensive community rollout, and we'll be doing so within the next several months.
I have a question for you, sir. Is it your department, the Human Relations Department, or members of the review board itself actively working to make themselves available to groups in the community if they want explanation about their rights? And if a church or group contacted your office to get further information or have a presentation, is it possible to have somebody come to their group and talk?
Absolutely, and I think my office over the course of the next several months will be facilitating, not just waiting for phone calls to come in, but actually proactively facilitating meetings with various community groups and with churches. And I think partly this review process just really reiterated the need to make sure that that community outreach component is very actively pursued. So we will be doing so in the next several months.
I guess that the really significant news is that even though there have been a series of complaints initiated with the police department, they've all been handled and they have never come before your board.
At this point, we have not had an appeal filed. I will not say that I think, you know, in every situation, everyone is completely satisfied, but we have not had any appeals filed at this point. But I'm certain there will be.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that the board, and we want to make sure that the board is ready and there to respond impartially and neutrally to that when it occurs.
Okay, others? Yes, Mr. Lewis?
Is there anything else that you saw in the process as you went through the review that you would like to point out to the board to the council at this time that you felt might, once we get into this process, it might throw up a red flag? Anything that you've seen thus far?
Well,
I know we haven't had one.
Yes, sir.
But potentially, you know, down the road, is there anything that you've seen that we may want to try to address now that we want to take a look at? We've tried to structure this thing over a year. Is there anything out there that you see that we need to take a look at, possibly as a council?
You know, I've spent quite a bit of time over the last several weeks thinking of that, and at this point at least, without having the experience under our belts, it would be difficult for me to choose a particular thing and to look forward. You know, I will say the reporting requirement that's been discussed, that is something that we will be very serious about. It was an oversight, honestly, on my office's part. You should have received a report in July and October. You will be receiving those quarterly reports. They will be in writing. I think it's important for us to make sure that we're doing all the things that we're supposed to in order to build that type of credibility in the community, so that when the board ultimately has to make a difficult decision, they have the credibility to do so. So I don't have a specific answer at this point, but again, I think it's important that we follow all of the mandates of the ordinance and do the best that we can to faithfully implement those.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, Mayor first, and then Heather.
I think people shouldn't really be surprised that we don't have any appeals to this board yet. We do have a very good police department, for one thing, but when I went to the initial training session, the city of San Jose, California, which is a huge city, it's got several million people, they only had 25 complaints a year. So you don't normally expect to get a lot of complaints, and this is just another way of showing that Urbana has transparent government. We have a good police department, and we are willing to give someone an independent body to look at their complaint if they're not satisfied with what the chief of police does.
And Heather?
Well, over a year ago, when this came before us, I'll be the first to say that I voted against it. It was something that I felt like I couldn't support, because I think we have a great police department and officers who do a tremendous job, and it concerned me that they would maybe have people coming and complaining, well, the officer tightened my cuffs too tight, or something just so minor. And when I look at these complaints, they are pretty minor. And so that's why I didn't support it. I felt like we were almost saying, hey, we don't trust our police department. And I do trust our police department, and I want to know that I'm safe, and that means that Jennifer DeFanis can put the cuffs on no matter how tight it has to be, to make sure that the other people might be around are safe. And so that's why I didn't support it a year and a half ago. And I I wouldn't be able to tonight support anything that would be adding anything more to it than the 45 days. I think saying a felon or a retired officer could be on there. They don't offer a objective point of view, and so I can't, for that I couldn't support adding those new measures to it at all.
Okay, thank you. So we've had a proposal to forward this to council with approval, and there were two amended sections. One, your comment, Mayor, was the word working. Okay. Okay. Business days, you were saying. Working. Okay. That's right. That would be section 19-228, and it would be section G underneath that. And Lynn's comment was, can you refresh us? Just to approve it. Okay. All right. And there were no other additions or corrections as written? Okay, then have a vote and find out if we wish to send this forward to council. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. 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 Those opposed? None. Okay, so this will be sent forward to City Council for final approval. Thank you, Todd.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Okay, ordinance number 2009-04-037, an ordinance amending section 12.5-34 of the Urbana City Code concerning waiver of fees authorized under the rental registration program. Do we have anyone presenting? Is that Libby? Thank you, Libby. Go ahead.
This is a minor amendment to the codified portion of our city ordinance that pertains to rental registration. It includes a fee exemption, not the program exemption, for housing projects that are funded by Medicaid or the Illinois Department of Human Services, in addition to the previously exempted HUD developments. And this is being proposed at the suggestion and request of the Developmental Services Center. It will affect just 2 addresses in Urbana. And a few months ago, we did review the rental registration program in its entirety, and this was one of the amendments that we talked about bringing forward at this time. Mm-hmm. Any questions?
All right. Charlie? Okay, go ahead. Who would like to do that?
Second.
All right. Forwarded and seconded by Lynn Barnes and Charlie Smythe. It's good. It's very good to move business along. All right. Any discussion on this topic? Okay. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. And those opposed? And peripheral vision is excellent, probably. Okay, that goes forward to City Council with approval. The next item is ordinance number 2009-04-038, an ordinance approving the City of Urbana and the Urbana-Champaign and Champaign County Home Consortium for the year 2009 to 2010, and this is the annual action plan. John.
Good evening. Just try to give a very brief overview. One point of good news is that the Crystal View Townhomes project was closed today, so that means all the documents are being recorded, so we should see construction beginning sometime in the next couple of weeks, and we are planning a groundbreaking ceremony. We'll let everybody know when that will take place. But with respect to the annual action plan, as you know, by May 15th each year, the city is required to submit a request for funding to HUD in order to get funded for the upcoming year. One of the differences in this year's plan or proposed plan is that we have not yet received any inkling as to what our funding amount will be for the upcoming year from HUD. The Department of Housing and Urban Development has been extremely busy with different types of grant programs, and basically our HUD rep directed us to develop our annual action plan based on the funding that we received for last year. So if we do, and if the funding is increased, and we kind of hope it is, then what we would do is we would just put a place keeper in the plan when we find out, if we do find out before we submit it, and then we would come back with an amendment as to how to allocate those other funds. So just briefly, our annual action plan, the Community Development Block Grant Program, we are allowed to use 20% of the funding for administration, which means staff costs and office budgeting costs and overhead and things of that nature. We have allocated approximately $280,000 to our housing programs that have been developed over years to address the housing needs of our community. They include our emergency grant program, our Urbana Senior Repair Program, and the lot acquisition program. The lot acquisition program is the one that we use to acquire properties that are blight, and we remove those and make those properties available for affordable housing development. Also, for public facilities and improvements, we have allocated or proposed to allocate some funds for projects. A Woman's Fund has requested approximately $19,000 to rehab 2 restrooms in their current facility on Main Street. Disabled Citizens Foundation is asking for roughly $33,000 to renovate their 8-bed group home on Scoville Circle. And we also, as a result of some public requests, public comment, have allocated some funds for neighborhood sidewalks for a couple of the neighborhoods, requesting them in target area neighborhoods. And we've set aside a little bit of funding for a future project that's going to require quite a bit of CDBG and I believe TIF funding in the years to come, so we like to set aside a little bit each year instead of having it hit our community development block grant budget in one year. And with respect to public service, HUD allows us to set aside 15% of our allocation for public service funding. And some of the comments that were received basically requested as the most we could allocate for public service. And part of the public service funding, the Consolidated Social Service Grant system that we have in place now combines city budget, regular budget funds, township funds, and CDBG funds. And one of the programs that we have in our public service that we fund with our public service funds is our transitional housing for homeless families. And we have currently we have five homes that we operate, and of course that houses 5 families for sometimes up to 2 years depending on their need. We also fund partially the neighborhood cleanup program, and then this year we set aside the same amount we set aside to donate of CDBG to the Consolidated Social Service Fund of $12,500. So that's the community development. That's the part of the plan that we are directly responsible for our community development. We get an entitlement of community development block grant funds. We get a separate entitlement as being part of the Urbana Home Consortium. And we work in a joint effort among the 3 consortium members. Basically, it's City of Urbana, City of Champaign, and Champaign County to develop the budget for the home consortium. And we're allowed to allocate 10% for admin or administration funds. Then we set aside, we're required to set aside 15% of our funding, annual grant funding for Community Housing Development Organization, or CHODO projects. And our allocation this year, our plan provides $80,000 in home funds for the Homestead Affordable Home Ownership Program, an additional $14,000 for Ecolab for the project that we anticipate will be constructed on North Division Street. And a new proposal is for a duplex that Ecolab proposes to build, and I believe it will be in Champaign County on a duplex lot in the Dobbins Downs subdivision. Then we are allowed to allocate up to 5% of our funding for operating, or CHODO operating, which allows them to build capacity, pay staff, until they get to a point where they're able to fund their projects generally through their funding through developer fees and things of that nature. And as you see on our plan, we also have our City of Urbana funds. We have set aside $175,000 in home and match for our owner-occupied housing program. We're actually increased the past couple of years. We've only been able to fund 4 to 5 units. We've increased that to 6 to 7. We have a waiting list of approximately 40 households that are waiting for assistance through this program. And then we also have city redevelopment programs, which we intend to use for projects such as the Kerr Avenue development or other purchase, rehab, resale property acquisition programs. And the City of Champaign has given us their budget, or their proposed budget, and Champaign County as well. The issue for the City of Urbana's portion of the home funds requires $54,000 in match funds, local match, which is traditionally allocated from the Capital Improvement Fund. So that's kind of a summary. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I have one. The HUD representative suggested that you use the past year's allocation funding from them as a basis for your program, but we know that we've had a rise in our census has been recalculated in certain areas. Will that affect the expected income for the next year, even though we haven't talked about that?
My understanding of the census recount, it does not affect, it only affects things at the state level. It does not affect the HUD level funding.
Oh, so it won't come down through the state
as an
enlarged
No, and
endowment.
I think another point is, many of you are probably aware of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. We received a notification that we would receive $125,097 through that program. However, and that's not in here, HUD says that is going to have to be an amendment to our 2008-2009 program, annual action plan. And I just requested information from our HUD rep, and they're still in the process of developing program guidelines. And until they do, we can't really even take any public input because we don't know what the eligible items for expenditure are going to be. So, but the minute that we find out from HUD, we'll publish a annual action plan amendment, public hearing process, and go through that process and get that money out on the street as quickly as we can.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is there any other comments or questions for John Schneider? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Lewis.
Well, a lot of people have been asking me questions about how much Urbana spends for social service grants and that kind of thing. And we talked about it briefly a while back. Can you give them a real feel for how much totally we spend each year?
I think that the total, Kelly, you'd probably have to correct me if I'm wrong, my ballpark estimate, I believe it was in the $298,000 range last year. Was it more than that? Was it $308,000? It was $304,000 to $308,000 last year. But typically, we allocate CDBG funding as much as we can below. They maintain the cap, the 15% cap, but we want to be sure to keep the transitional housing for homeless families program going, and that's a public service program. And then, as Kelly explained earlier, the Consolidated Social Service funding grant process that you're about to go through. We don't know what that amount will be this year, but I think over the past few years we've averaged around $300,000 with the combined township, City of Champaign General Fund, and CDBG money.
And what about the homeless and The disability issue, the 197,000.
Oh, that 196,000, that's acquired through the continuum of care. It's a joint effort that funds Salvation Army, transitional housing for homeless, both men's shelter and families. It funds Women's Fund and Center for Women in Transition.
So if you tag all that together, you're right at 400,000 plus.
500,000.
500,000.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, Mayor?
Go ahead.
Oh, Lynn?
I was going to make a recommendation that we move this forward to council.
I thought you were. Okay, that recommendation is made and it's been seconded by Charlie. Mayor, do you have a comment, though?
Yeah, my question was on the homeless population, about what percentage is not helped by the funds that we have available. How much of an impact are we having on this group?
I'd have to defer to my expert, Kelly. I know that one thing that we do have is the most recent survey was completed by the Continuum of Care, and the numbers have gone up in the last year. And I think a big concern of council was the number of homeless children. And according to the survey, 140 of the households included minors, the homeless households, affecting a total of 264 children from the ages of 0 to 18. And I think the consortium, the Continuum of Care is always focused on how we can address those things. I do know that the City of Champaign will be amending their home program budget for previous years to allocate funds to tenant-based rental assistance program, which helps homeless families. I also know that the Housing Authority recently received notification of a grant for, it's called Rental Support Program, where they're able to help property owners rehab their property, Section 8 properties, so that they'll be in better condition, and that might make their funding stretch a little bit farther. So, but as far as percentages, I don't think I can give you that, but I can look into that for you and get back with you.
All right. Okay, so we've had a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. Those in favor of passing this forward to City Council with approval, please indicate by saying yes.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and opposed? Okay, that goes forward. Okay, and the next one is similar, resolution number 2009-04-015R, a resolution approving participation in Illinois Housing Development Authority first-time homebuyer single-family program, the MCC program series 2009. Do you have more to say?
Well, it would be the next one as well.
Okay.
They're kind of together.
Number 11?
Omnibus.
Okay, we'll do that in omnibus fashion then. Resolution number 2009-04-016R, a resolution evidencing the intention of the City of Urbana, Champaign County, Illinois, to transfer volume cap in connection with private activity bond issues, single-family mortgage revenue bonds, and related matters, the private bond cap allocation, Assist Urbana, Series 2009. Okay, now tell us.
Okay.
It's quite a lot there.
Basically, we receive annually an allocation of private activity volume bond cap that's based on the population, and then there's a multiplier. And this year, the multiplier is about approximately $90 per capita. So our funding results in $3,553,560 that we have available to allocate for activities such as below market rate financing for affordable housing, mortgage credit certificates in support of home ownership, or below market rate financing for limited types of industrial developments. And at our Community Development Commission, we discussed this at length. I've talked with Tom Carino about the potential for using this for industrial development, but we don't have anything currently that would be able to use those funds. So basically, the ASSIST program provides down payment assistance and sometimes lower than market rate FHA loans and VA loans. But in the past year, the ASSIST, because of the kind of the downturn in the economy, the bond market has kind of withered a little bit, and they're basically asking, because of their previous performance over a period of 5 years or more, that they're asking for our support in this manner, and they will have 3 years to develop a program that they're working on developing now. They'll have 3 years to use these funds. For the mortgage credit certificate program, IDA had a similar to the assist program, but they discontinued that, again, because of the inability to market the bonds. And the way the mortgage credit certificate program works is for a home buyer, it's a direct tax credit. They get 25% of their interest as a direct credit from their tax liability. So one of those tax credits at the very end. For us, that's a very attractive program, and that helps people who already come in with down payment funds available. So our CDC voted unanimously to support these two allocations.
Okay. Charlie, go ahead.
John, quick question. How do people find out about these programs?
We have information. We create pamphlets when people call first-time home buyers. We post it on the website. We also send out, if somebody calls and asks questions about first-time home buyers, we send out a first-time home buyer packet that has this information in it. In addition, we have an annual housing fair that we work with the Community Reinvestment Group, which will be held on April 24th, I believe, 25th. And this year, in the past several years, we've had it at Lincoln Square Village. This year it will be in the City of Champaign City Building. And basically we invite anybody who's interested in becoming a home buyer to attend that. We have lenders that are available for consultations.
But you do work with all the banks,
right,
loan officers,
right,
too. They all know about the program.
Right.
Okay.
We market it through the banks as well.
Okay.
We have a monthly meeting. Janelle and I, our home grant coordinator and I meet monthly with our Community Reinvestment Group, which is a group of local lenders that, we work together on strategies for affordable housing initiatives.
Okay, and then how soon would we get some feedback on the first of these two programs and their, developing new ideas or whatever?
Well, as soon as we get it, I spoke recently with David Rosh, and he said they're working on different bond structures. I mean, he said that in his letter, on approaching probably a new approach to how they can provide funds. But I'd say, I don't know exactly when. We have to pass this by March 1st. We have to send a letter to the governor. So I'm guessing it'll be sometime this summer before we would know anything definitive.
Okay, there are other questions? Okay, is there a motion then?
I move to send both these to council with a recommendation for approval.
Second.
Okay, we've had the motion and seconded by Charlie and Lynn Barnes. Further discussion? Okay, seeing none, those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, these will go forward. Thank you very much, John. All right. Item number 12 is being postponed until May 11th, council meeting, as we indicated earlier. Moving on to number 13, ordinance number 2009-03-018, an ordinance approving a text amendment to the zoning ordinance of the City of Urbana, Illinois. This is in addition to section Roman numeral 6-8, outdoor lighting standards, planning case 2081-T-09. Let there be light.
Thank you. This ordinance was presented to council back in March. The council had some discussion back then, and since then staff has made just one minor change based on that discussion. The change is to section E, number 2 in your ordinance packet. Originally, we had just proposed requiring full cutoff fixtures for commercial and multifamily lighting. After discussion, we think we should add this additional language to allow fixtures with a uplight rating of U1 or less. So it would be U1 or U0. And that's the only change we've got for you.
And what part of the ordinance was that? In section E, additional requirements? Is that where you're reading it?
Under E2.
E2. I see, the underlined
it's
section.
Underlined, yeah.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to answer any questions for you.
Okay. So basically, is the city moving to this the BUG measurement system? Is that part of this discussion as well?
Well, it's still
too soon?
No other municipalities that we could find currently do use the BUG system, but if it does catch on, and we're thinking it probably will catch on, we thought it would be prudent to just go ahead and include that option in our ordinance.
Okay. Any other comments? Charlie Smythe.
I have two items. At the top of page 4, third line, you say this requirement limits the use of low-efficiency incandescent, and that makes sense. But then it says, and LED sources, which I don't understand why LED sources fall into the same category as incandescents here.
There were some earlier where LED lights were not always as efficient as they were, and in research we found that there were some that had less than 60 lumens per watt efficiency. So
Older LED
some
stuff
older
there.
ones,
Okay.
right,
Okay.
yeah.
And then I guess one of the issues that concerns me is getting rid of some of the really blatantly bad lighting in the community. You know, I'm thinking that, and there was one removed from my neighborhood within several weeks ago. Thank you, folks. You know, that's the Ameren, glow bomb, the very bright ones that have the big dropping head on them, and basically they put one up that was lighting an entire block, from one end of the street to the other. All the backyards were lit up by this one single light, at 30 feet up. And I know that there are more in the community. I know they proliferate around the county. I'd love to get rid of those out there too, but we don't have any jurisdiction. So my concern at this point now is how can we get rid of some of the worst offending lights if we don't have any kind of grandfathering in here that says, you have to, within 10 or 12 years or 5 years, move to a better, more efficient lighting and one that conforms with city code. Now we've got lighting that I'm sure that's 50 years old, as I recall. Some of the stuff on parts of my neighborhood and such, and onto campus. I mean, so these lights can last a lot longer than 15 or 20 years. So, that's my only concern. I think this is a great effort, Jeff, and thank you very much. I've already gotten compliments from several people on this that have read it online, and so they're very happy with it. But like I said, that's my one concern, and I'd like to see it addressed in some fashion.
All right. Other comments? Actually, I think that's an appropriate inquiry, because without a process of retiring the lighting that is the most glaring and bright in the community, it'd be hard to make the improvements. Although I understand that the city's approach is to let there be a replacement through new attrition by use. And okay, so other comments? Robert, are you making comment?
If I could just add one thing. Nuisance lights can't be grandfathered. So if the light is a nuisance, that can be reported, and if it is defined as a nuisance under our ordinance and the zoning administrator, then they would have to change that light, remove it, or modify it, make sure it wasn't no longer a nuisance.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, other comments, Lynn Barnes?
I'd just like to suggest that we'd want to, I think, use caution with any kind of yearly limits, because I think the cost to that could be significant for either the city itself or other developers or other people who are doing things out there. So I understand your zeal, but I think we just want to do that with great caution, because the cost could be pretty exorbitant. And with that, go ahead.
I was just going to say that Homer Glenn, put a 12-year limit out there. I mean, that's a fairly long limit. And, staff is saying 10 to 15 years on a lot of the lifespan of the stuff. So, and maybe energy costs are going to drive it anyway. So,
yes.
I'm not so adamant about this, especially if we can use the nuisance provisions of this to go after the really worst ones. Now, of course, my astronomer friends would probably say that any light above the horizon is a nuisance, but, and we do have situations where things are overly lit, and that's another concern. I don't know how we move away from the overly lit stuff.
Okay, Robert, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I was just going to add one thing,
Okay.
because we talked about this quite a bit. In one way, it makes some sense to have a time limit, but when you start thinking about how would you actually do that? I don't know how Homer Glen in 12 years, how are they going to know which lights went in 12 years ago and which ones didn't? I mean, you'd have to have a tracking system for literally thousands of lights if you want to do it really right. We just don't have that sort of system or ability here. So I think the other way is the wise way in our case.
So you're saying that basically is when a replacement takes place at a business or an industrial site or a residential street, we'll be using the newer
Right, because we're going to be reviewing those plans anyway as part of our plan review. So at that time, we can review the plans, make sure they're the right lights that go in.
But how do you review a light that burns out in a business? They don't usually come to you with approval, do they? They call the repairman, and an electrician comes out and replaces their light. So how is that handled?
If just a light bulb burns out and they're putting in a new light bulb, then that wouldn't trigger anything unless the light is such that it becomes a nuisance. So if you had a real low wattage light bulb and you put in a really high one, potentially that could become a nuisance. But
okay. So we're talking about fixture replacement rather than bulb replacements.
Yeah, when fixtures are replaced, we would review those plans as part of the plan review and make sure they're the right fixtures.
Okay, Charlene, then.
I'd like to move, go ahead. I'm not Charlie.
Yeah, well, the issue on the fixture replacement, though, is, I can imagine that unless you make sure every electrician within, 100 miles of Urbana knows that we have this ordinance, how are we going to enforce new fixtures on, I should say, how are we going to enforce replacement fixtures? Not, obviously we can do the new construction and stuff like that, or major remodels, but not everything's going to fall into that, is it?
I think when you're putting up new fixtures, you need to come to the city to get at least an electrical permit. So that would trigger, that permit would trigger that process.
Okay. And then Lynn Barnes.
I'd like to move this forward to council with a recommendation for approval.
Okay, there's been forwarded, recommendation to forward in second. Those in favor, please, if there's no more discussion, those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's forward. All right. Okay, we have one more, and then we have two more. Then I'll go back to your comment, Heather. Okay, ordinance number 2009-03-024, an ordinance amending Chapter 8 of the City of Urbana Code of Ordinances to authorize the charging of costs of certain fire and rescue services to non-resident parties. And our legal staff.
Okay, thank you.
Ron O'Brien.
Essentially, this is a ordinance that seeks to reimburse the city for costs that it incurs in personnel, time, and equipment when the fire department responds to certain emergency calls on the city's streets and highways. Recently, there was a state statute that came into effect which one moment, please. That is 65 ILCS 5/11-6-6, which gives the corporate authorities of a municipality the authority to fix, charge, and collect reasonable fees for technical rescue services provided by the department. And that's what this ordinance seeks to do. From time to time, they have to respond, they have to use special equipment, thinking mostly on things that happen out on the highways and on busier streets. So of course, we're not charging residents, but we are seeking to get reimbursed for non-residents of city and of Urbana and Champaign. Insurance policies frequently anticipate this type of charge and will reimburse the coverage holder or will provide payment for them. And upon information and belief, the chief has informed me that this is not uncommon and a number of communities do it. Yes. I'm sorry. Dennis.
Okay. Yes, okay, Lynn.
So scenario, someone from Danville is on their way to Champaign, and they're on I-74 at the exit with Lincoln and I-74, and they're in a car accident, and they need to be extracted with the jaws of life. And so the fire department uses those. So there would be a fee schedule set up for a variety of things as well as time, and then they would be billed for those services. Is that correct?
Yes, the numbers have gone up, but the older numbers that I have would be the national norm for these incidents is $150 per hour per apparatus that's used, and $35 per firefighter with a minimum of $250. So these numbers are old. They'll go up. They're actually higher than this now in terms of the normal numbers that are used. Again, yes, the insurance policies typically will cover things of this nature when you're extracted. You know, it's part of your normal liability coverage. And yes, if a person from Danville were to get in an accident within our jurisdictional limits and we had to go out and extract them, yes, there would be a charge for that.
Does anybody have any comments on that? Heather Stevenson.
Where did this come from? Why did we come up with this?
Well, as I said, there was a state statute that became effective as of January of this year. That's the statute that I read off to you that allows corporate authorities to assess something like this. And as I was told, my understanding is that a number of communities do this.
So it allows us to, but we don't have to?
No, of course not. Of course not.
Who?
I'm sorry, I don't have that information. I anticipated someone from the fire department being here, so some of the information on details like that is not mine.
Charlie?
Yeah, okay. Continuing the scenario analysis, what are we going to define as resident versus non-resident?
Well, if you look at...
I was trying to find it. No, is it... I mean, if somebody from Champaign has to...
No, it's not. It does not include Champaign.
Okay.
So if you look on page 2 of 4, in section 8-75, in the definitions...
Non-resident.
We define a non-resident as any individual requiring fire rescue services on the streets and highways located within the jurisdictional limits of the city of Urbana, who does not own or rent a residence in the cities of Urbana or Champaign, Illinois, for a minimum period of at least 6 months out of the last 12 calendar months prior to the date of services.
So basically, Savoy, anybody in the county within would be a non-resident then?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, I've got a question then.
Yes.
So what if we have a person who's uninsured, and everybody has insurance to cover? I mean, they may have automobile insurance, but they may not have, special, additional accidental liability, or we have
you're
various
required by
kinds.
state law to have liability insurance, and
But that wouldn't cover a rescue operation.
Correct.
You think
it might. Yeah, it depends on what your coverages are.
That's what I'm wondering about. Not everybody has the same
Covers
coverage.
The other person's car.
I'm sorry?
Wouldn't the basic insurance just cover the other person's car, and if you had the basic?
Oh, you're saying it wouldn't cover your own extraction?
Right.
That's
Okay.
that's
I'm
correct.
sorry, I misunderstood you. Yeah, you would still be billed. You'd still be liable for those services. You don't, and understand, this is not for citizens of this community whose tax money goes to pay for our fire department. This happens, the way I was told, this happens about 20 times a year, okay? But for larger accidents, it could involve the city expending thousands of dollars in man-hours and equipment usage to extract folks from vehicles or to clean up messes that occur from accidents. If you're an at-fault driver, okay, and you don't have adequate insurance, for example, and let's say the limits on your liability policy are $20,000, just to throw a number out there. If you cost $30,000 worth of damage, you're responsible for that. So in other words, you owe the other driver or the other vehicles involved that $10,000. And the fact that you don't have insurance to cover that $10,000 does not obviate your need to pay it.
Okay, we've got some more comments. Lynn Barnes and then the mayor.
Just the second time on the subject. I'm not entirely against this. It feels a little uncomfortable because if you kind of take this beyond the scope of this particular issue, you could imagine police charging for their services in other jurisdictions when they help out. I mean, you can almost take this, it kind of goes on, and it could turn around and increase insurance rates. I mean, because let's face it, insurance companies aren't just going to take it lying down. They aren't going to, they're going to pass the cost on somewhere. Well, again, I'm not totally against it, but I'd like to hear more from the fire chief on this matter and kind of what his thinking is and what he's hearing, among the ranks of other fire chiefs and other communities of our size. And, I'd like to hear a little bit more about that before we actually take any action on this one.
Well, let me also point out, too, that, your scenario of you could take this, extend this in an analogous fashion to other services that the city provides. There's not a state statute for those other things. And I think that the fact that one was created and became effective this year is some indicia that this is not a strange notion here. Again, we're not required to do it, but it is something that's being available because I think there's a tacit recognition by the state legislature that the expenses that are concomitant to dealing with folks who are not from our community in terms of providing rescue services significant. And I think that it's not egregious to try to recoup some of that. And maybe there are some fees that will be uncollectible. Somebody doesn't have insurance policy, maybe they're indigent, and we just can't, it's not worth the time and money to go pursue them to get that money. But if someone has an insurance policy that covers this type of service and we can receive compensation for the reimbursement, I think it would make financial sense to do so.
Mayor.
Well, in response to Lynn's question about the departments billing each other, we just exchange services with other departments because we have agreements with them. But my question would be, is the city of Champaign adopting this same measure?
That is a question the chief would have to answer for you. I don't know.
Okay.
I have a thought, too. I'll get back to you, Lynn. This is the fire and rescue, Urbana Fire and Rescue crew who went down and, helped people in the Katrina disaster for free for several weeks, who now potentially are going to bill their local citizens for fire and rescue.
Not our local citizens.
Well, citizens of the county, potentially.
Maybe, yes.
Citizens of the county. These are people who come and shop and do business in our community. People from Savoy, possibly from Danville, possibly from Rantoul.
Could be.
Could be. We don't know. Mostly you have an accident within 20 miles of your home, I'm told. And so I think it's worth considering whether this is a wise move or not, or exactly how to proceed.
May I respond to?
Sure you can.
I don't find everything that you said not uncompelling. I want to point out something, though. When our firefighters go do volunteer work and do lend significant contributions to helping others, it's a strategic decision that is made, within the fire department that wasn't something that was foisted upon us and is unpredictable. In other words, we can decide when we're going to lend our help and whether or not we're able to spare the manpower or the equipment or the expense. You know, in this situation, it's a little bit different in that we have potentially individuals who don't contribute to this fire department or the city's tax base, who are in need of services, and we are providing these services using local citizens' tax dollars to pay to provide services to someone from without the community. So I just...
And this happens about 20 times a year.
That's what that number sticks out to me, and I'd have to confirm that with the chief. But I think we're talking about, you know, roughly 20 some odd occasions a year. So we're not talking about a huge number of occasions, but sometimes significant cost to the city.
And Lynn Barnes.
I'd like to make a motion to postpone this until either next week or the following week when the fire, 2 weeks from now, 2 weeks from tonight, to the next committee of the whole, and then ask the fire chief or his delegate to come and give a bit of a lead a discussion with us about this.
Second that.
Okay, the motion to postpone for 2 weeks to have a more thorough discussion has been made and seconded. Any discussion on that? Those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's postponed until our next committee of the whole meeting. Okay, ordinance number, this is item number 15 on the agenda, ordinance number 2009-04-039, an ordinance amending Chapter 22.5 of the City of Urbana Code of Ordinances, and this is to add new sections to the Article Roman numeral 9, requiring a cable video service provider fee and PEG access support fee. And Ron, Mr. O'Neill.
Thank you. This is an ordinance that seeks to provide a level playing ground. As you know, that we negotiate our franchise agreements with individual companies such as Comcast who wish to have a cable franchise within our community. However, due to the new state legislation that provides an opportunity for cable and video providers to adopt a statewide franchise, in which case they do not have to negotiate individual franchises with each municipality. And quite frankly, you know, I'm really talking about like AT&T. They are the ones that were the proponents of that state legislation, and they use it. So what this does is this codifies some of the, or at least the biggest financial portion of what we already expect in our current franchise agreement and what we're trying to get, again, from Comcast, who is negotiating with us. And that primarily is the 5% franchise fee and the 2% PEG fee. So this will codify it, and so even if a cable operator or video provider does not negotiate an individual franchise agreement with us and chooses instead to adopt a state franchise, the state statute still provides that they pay what we normally get.
Okay, that's the comments. Are there questions for Ron? I guess I have one. Because we're doing this and we're already in negotiation with one company, is it an appropriate action for us to take at this time? There's not any question concerning...
Yes, it is, because as soon as AT&T, well, let me put it this way. AT&T and any other provider who chooses to invoke a statewide franchise, what numbers would they use? What numbers would they be required to give to us by way of franchise fee? We have to have something in place that says this is what, in our community, what numbers we expect in terms of our franchise and our PEG fee. This probably should have been done a while back.
So we're not jeopardizing anything by doing it this time? Okay. Yes, Charlie Smythe. Okay. David Geary.
I was just going to suggest we move that we send this to the City Council with a suggestion to approve.
Second.
Okay. It's been a motion and a seconded. Charlie Smythe, discussion?
Yeah, Ron, in thinking about this and looking it over real quickly, can we insert anything related to service, local, quality of service type issues, carrying local channels, service to all of the community, in other words, things like that? Or is that strictly defined by the state statute? We can't stick anything in there?
That's an excellent question, and it is, unfortunately. One of the things when they were still haggling over this legislation that I had hoped that would be required is that cable companies be required to commit or have to put in a certain amount of infrastructure in low-income areas of a municipality, but the state legislature didn't see fit to put something like that in. And in fact, in terms of customer service and issues like that, anything that we would require is preempted by that state statute. So if someone is adopting a state franchise, they follow the protocol and the
I was just wondering if we could sneak something in or not. There's just
we could, but these cable companies
it's specifically preempted at the state level.
If you're getting a state franchise, they would not be obliged or inclined to follow anything like that we would put in there, as much as I would like to.
Okay. I think it's really valuable to put this into our code, because we certainly do expect and hope to continue these returns from our use of our cable network infrastructures. All right, so those in favor of passing this and sending it to City Council with approval indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay. I wanted to ask the city clerk something before we go into closed session. City Clerk, when we changed the agenda and we omitted number 12, we didn't vote on that, and is it required that we make a vote officially to eliminate something from our agenda? Do we need to take a roll call vote or anything like that?
No, you don't need to do that, as long as the council agrees at the time that the motion is made, then it's okay. You don't need to vote on that issue.
Okay, we didn't really make a formal motion, so is that an oversight that we should correct?
You can make that motion now if you wish to do so.
Okay, just as a legal thing.
I move that we postpone consideration of resolution number 2009-03-011R to May 11th.
Second.
Okay. Those in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Okay, that's officially taken care of, I think. Charlie.
And then before I make a motion here to go into closed session, I'd like to welcome Diane Marlin. We're right on schedule. We're going to be done by 9, hopefully, not including this closed session. So
Enjoy that.
But look how much we could get through real quickly. So, but there'll be other nights. Anyway, welcome, Diane.
Yeah.
I make a motion to go into closed session for the purpose of property acquisition issues pursuant to 5 Illinois Consolidated Statutes 120/2 C5.
Okay, it's been motioned and seconded. Shall we go into closed session? All those indicating so say aye.
We have to take a roll call.
Oh, roll call, sorry. Okay.
Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Garrick?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yeah. Yes.
Mayor Pressing?
All right, we'll be back after the closed session.